Thanks. Well, so the question is identity politics a new culture war? And the word new struck me because actually I think well, most of us who have been tuned into politics will know that identity politics isn't necessarily anything new. The word intersectional feminism, or the phrase intersectional feminism, which is largely the same or is kind of the precursor to identity politics as we know it today, was coined in the 80s, the late 80s, and that was about the idea that within feminism, different women would have different feminisms. A black woman would have a different feminism to a white woman, the same with gay or straight. I think that's kind of a crude summing up of it, but the idea of identity politics, of politics being to do intrinsically with your identity, the personal is political, that's nothing new. So it's not that we have a new phenomenon in our hands with, I think, not to put it too strongly, today's obsession with identity politics, but it is that it's turned up a gear. I think that especially in the last 10 years, most of the political conversation has been centered around identity and identity politics. Conversations about racism have turned into the intrinsic of race identity. Conversations about women's liberation and freedom movements have become centered around what it is to be a woman. The same with much of the gay liberation movements that came out in the 80s. They really kind of channeled down into a focus on identity, and I think that now certainly most of us will probably identify identity politics with the younger generation, as we see it, kind of to crudely stereotype it. Students on campus talking about the fact that they are, as a black trans student or as a white cis woman, that's the kind of thing you get heard said, and that is new, you know, that kind of level of obsession with it. And I'm going to come straight out and say that I really think it's a problem today, actually. I think that the obsession with identity politics has meant that we have a more introspective, more shallow politics than ever before, really. I think that the obsession with identity is an interesting one, because of course identity is important to all of us. It is extremely important to me sometimes that I'm a woman. Sometimes it's extremely important to me that I'm second generation Irish. Sometimes it's extremely important that I'm from London. But the point is, I think that all of those things can be put to one side when I'm talking about politics, when I'm trying to reach out to what I see as a universal idea, when I'm trying to talk to someone who looks and sounds completely different to me. Then maybe the attributes of my identity wouldn't matter. And I think the problem is that identity politics today, and the idea that where you were born, what you look like, what you got in your pants, what gender you are, that would be intrinsic to your political point of view. For example, my editor, Brendan O'Neill, who for as long as he's been in politics has been extremely pro-choice and pro the decriminalisation of abortion, was banned from making that argument at Oxford on the basis that he was a man because he didn't have a uterus. So that's a really good example of where identity, in terms of his identity as a man, got in the way of him making a political argument. And you can see that really strongly, I think, just to kind of give a topical example, with what's happening with the Me Too campaign. As Hilary mentioned, as a woman, I don't think I've heard as a woman as much as I have in the last month. Women have been, and feminists, contemporary feminists, have been coming out and claiming the conversation about sexual harassment on the basis of identity. Now, obviously, much of what's been talked about is in relation to women, so there's some truth to that. But I think what it's shifted into is a focus on this is intrinsically a woman's battle, only women can talk about it. And really, what's the end point of that? I mean, it's quite a dystopian end point. It means that we can't express genuine solidarity. We can't reach across what we were born with and transcend the barriers, you know, that we were born with in many ways, and reach out to each other politically. I think that's extremely negative. And so, while we need to recognize that while identity is important, identity politics is a new culture war, and I think it's one that we're sorely losing, those of us who actually believe in freedom, democracy, transcending our, you know, the barriers of who we are in terms of what we were born with, and moving beyond to some kind of universal idea. And that might sound very abstract and airy-fairy, but I think it's an argument that isn't being made very much today, and it was quite a controversial thing to say that identity politics is a problem, when actually I think that a much more progressive thing is to say that it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you were born or what you look like, it matters what you say and what you do.